There are places we walk every day, streets that seem safe. They are lined with flowers, mailboxes, and laughter. But sometimes, something dark hides in the light. Evil does not always wear a mask or come with a warning. It waits in the quiet corners of cities. It lurks behind smiles and familiar faces. The neighbor who waves, the friend you trust. In plain daylight, the unthinkable can begin. We rarely notice until it is too late. The truth is unsettling. The most ordinary places can hold the darkest secrets. The line between normal and nightmare is thin. So thin you could step across it without knowing. The shadows are not just in alleys or abandoned houses. They are here, where you live, breathe, and believe you are safe. Why do we look into the darkness? What is it about the unknown, the shadowy corners of our world, that draws our eyes and our minds? There's something magnetic about the mysteries that lurk just out of sight, something that calls to our deepest instincts. Why do stories of true crime pull us in? Maybe it's curiosity, that urge to know what happened and why. Maybe it's fear, the kind that makes us double-check the locks at night. Or maybe it's a mix of both, a fascination with danger and a desire to keep it at bay. Or maybe it's the hope that by understanding evil, we can protect ourselves. We want to believe that knowledge is power, that if we can just learn the warning signs, we'll be safe. We listen, we watch, we read, searching for clues that might help us avoid becoming the next headline. True crime reveals something hidden. It peels back the layers of ordinary life to expose the secrets beneath. It shows us that beneath the surface, danger can be lurking anywhere, even in the most familiar places. It shows us the parts of people we don't want to see, the darkness that can exist in anyone. We're forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that evil isn't always a stranger. Sometimes, it's someone we know, or even ourselves. The greed, the rage, the coldness, these emotions, these motives are not foreign to us. They're part of the human experience, and true crime stories force us to acknowledge that. These are not just stories, they are warnings. They remind us that the world is not always safe, and that we must remain vigilant. Each case is a lesson, a cautionary tale that lingers in our minds long after the story ends. They remind us that the worst kind of evil is human. Monsters aren't always imaginary. They walk among us, hidden in plain sight. This realization is chilling, but it's also what makes these stories impossible to ignore. We listen to these stories because they are real. Unlike fiction, true crime is rooted in actual events, real people, real consequences. The authenticity makes the fear more immediate, the lessons more urgent. They happen to someone, somewhere, just like us. The victims could have been our neighbors, our friends, or even ourselves. This connection makes the stories resonate on a personal level. That is what makes them so haunting. The line between safety and danger feels thin, and true crime reminds us how easily it can be crossed. Each tale is a mirror, showing us what could happen if we let our guard down. They make us more cautious, more aware, and sometimes more fearful. True crime stories are puzzles. We become detectives ourselves, piecing together clues, trying to make sense of the chaos. There's satisfaction in unraveling a mystery and finding answers where there were none. We hope that by solving them, we can find order in the chaos. We want to believe that justice can be served, that wrongs can be righted, and that the world can make sense again. But sometimes there are no answers. Some mysteries remain unsolved. Some questions never get closure. And maybe that's why we keep coming back. Because the search for truth, for understanding, never really ends. Sarah Green was loved by everyone. She was the friend who remembered birthdays, the daughter who called home every Sunday. She lived in a small town where everyone knew her name. No one ever thought she could vanish. One crisp autumn evening, Sarah left work and never came home. Her car was found 3 blocks away, keys still in the ignition. Her phone was on the passenger seat. There were no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, nothing. The town changed overnight. People locked their doors. Mothers walked their children home from school. Fear replaced the feeling of safety. How could someone disappear without a trace? Sarah's family pleaded for help. Her fiancé, Mark, stood by their side, holding back tears. Everyone believed he was heartbroken. They were wrong. Mark was charming. He had a way of lighting up a room, drawing people in with his easy smile and warm laughter. Friends and strangers alike found themselves at ease in his presence, never suspecting that anything could be amiss. He was handsome, calm, and always polite. The kind of man who remembered birthdays, who offered to help carry groceries, who never raised his voice in public. To everyone around him, Mark seemed like the perfect neighbor, the ideal friend, the loving partner. When Sarah disappeared, Mark was at the center of the search. He helped with the search, handed out flyers, and answered every question. He stood beside Sarah's family, comforting them, promising he would do everything in his power to bring her home. No one suspected him. Why would they? He was always there, always helpful, always present. He and Sarah seemed perfect together. Their friends envied their relationship, often commenting on how happy they looked, how in sync they seemed. They shared inside jokes, quiet moments, and dreams for the future. To the outside world, they were the couple everyone wanted to be. But beneath the surface, Mark kept secrets. There were moments when his smile faded, when his eyes grew distant, and no one could quite reach him. He was haunted by things he never spoke about, shadows that lingered just out of sight. He was living another life, a life full of lies. Behind closed doors, Mark juggled stories, hid evidence, and maintained a careful facade. He was a master at deception, skilled at keeping his 2 worlds apart. Police found messages from another woman, messages filled with promises and secrets. There were late-night calls, hidden meetings, and a web of deceit that stretched back months. This woman believed Mark would marry her. She had no idea about Sarah. At the same time, Mark was drowning in debt, desperate to cover his gambling losses. He owed money to people who didn't forgive easily, and the pressure was mounting. And then there was his temper, a side of Mark that almost no one saw. He hid it well, but in private, anger simmered just beneath the surface. Sometimes it boiled over, leaving holes in walls and bruises on his conscience. As detectives dug deeper, they found cracks in Mark's story. The details didn't fit, and the more they questioned him, the more inconsistencies appeared. His calm demeanor began to slip. His timeline did not add up. There were hours he couldn't account for, places he claimed to be but couldn't prove. The evidence was mounting, and the truth was closing in. He lied about where he was the night Sarah vanished. His alibi fell apart under scrutiny, and his nervous explanations only raised more questions. Neighbors remembered seeing him drive away, alone, late at night. Surveillance footage confirmed it. Mark was not where he said he was, and the pieces of his story no longer fit together. The truth was worse than anyone imagined. Mark was not grieving. He was hiding. He avoided eye contact, kept his distance, and seemed almost relieved when the questions stopped. He had become the monster no one saw coming. The charming man everyone trusted was gone, replaced by a stranger capable of anything. The unraveling truth revealed a darkness that had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. The police worked day and night, their faces drawn with exhaustion, their determination unwavering. The city never truly slept, and neither did the officers assigned to the case. Every hour brought new questions, new possibilities, and the hope that the next clue would finally break the case wide open. Every lead was followed, no matter how small or unlikely. Detectives pored over files, cross-referencing timelines and statements. Witnesses were interviewed again and again, their stories scrutinized for inconsistencies. Every story was checked, every alibi tested, as the team searched for the truth hidden beneath layers of lies and half-truths. At first, nothing pointed to Mark. He was just another face in the crowd, a man with no obvious motive, no history of violence. His name was barely mentioned in the early days of the investigation. Friends and neighbors vouched for his character, describing him as trustworthy and kind. But then, small details began to stand out. Details that didn't quite fit the story Mark had told. A receipt here, a forgotten conversation there. The detectives started to notice patterns, subtle inconsistencies that hinted at something darker beneath the surface. Phone records revealed late-night calls Mark never mentioned, calls made to numbers he claimed not to recognize. The logs painted a picture of secret meetings and hidden motives, raising more questions than answers. Security cameras caught his car traveling down a deserted road, miles from his home, at an hour when he claimed to be asleep. Detectives searched Mark's apartment, combing through every drawer and closet, searching for anything that might connect him to Sarah's disappearance. In a locked drawer, they found Sarah's necklace, a delicate chain she was never seen without. Its presence in Mark's apartment was impossible to explain away. That was the first real clue, the first piece of evidence that tied Mark directly to Sarah. It changed everything. Suddenly, Mark was no longer just a bystander, he was the prime suspect. Mark claimed she had left it behind, insisting it meant nothing. He told the police she must have forgotten it during a visit, that he'd meant to return it. But his explanations grew weaker with every question. No one believed him anymore. The detectives exchanged skeptical glances, and word spread quickly through the town. Whispers filled the streets, and suspicion grew with each passing day. The town watched as the case unfolded, glued to news reports and gossiping in hushed tones. People gathered outside the police station, desperate for answers, struggling to reconcile the man they thought they knew, with the evidence mounting against him. The courtroom was packed when Mark was arrested. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation and dread. The evidence was overwhelming, and the community braced itself for the truth. He confessed in the end, but only after weeks of denying everything. The pressure became too much, the lies too heavy to carry. In a stark interrogation room under the harsh glare of a single light, Mark finally broke down and told the truth. Sarah's body was found in a shallow grave outside town, hidden beneath the trees where no one was meant to find her. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, confirming their worst fears. The man everyone trusted had taken her life. Friends and neighbors stared at old photos in disbelief, struggling to understand how someone so familiar could commit such a terrible act. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. The shock and grief were almost too much for the small community to bear. At a candlelight vigil, people gathered to mourn Sarah, holding each other close as they tried to make sense of the tragedy. The town would never be the same again. While Sarah's case brought answers, other cases haunt us still. The Midnight Killer was never caught. For years he struck at random. His victims were young and old, rich and poor. No one felt safe. Each crime scene was marked with a strange symbol, a circle and a slash, painted on the wall. It became his signature. Police found no links between the victims. No one could predict where he would strike next. The fear spread like wildfire. People stayed inside after dark. Windows were locked, alarms set. The Midnight Killer became a ghost story. Except it was real. Years passed. The killings stopped, but the killer was never caught. His identity remains a mystery. The symbols faded, but the memory of his evil did not. Why do people do these things? Is it money? Is it anger? Sometimes it is a grudge that festers for years. Other times it's jealousy or the need for control. But some crimes have no easy answer. Experts study the minds of killers. They look for patterns, for reasons. Greed can turn a friend into a thief. Revenge can turn love into hate. But there is something deeper, a darkness that cannot be explained. There are people who enjoy hurting others. They live among us. They look normal, act friendly, and hide their true selves. Their motives are buried deep, beyond understanding. Each crime is a reminder. Evil is not always logical. It does not always make sense. The real monsters do not wear costumes. They do not have fangs or claws. Most of them look just like you and me. That is what makes them so dangerous. They blend in. They go to work, pay their bills, and say hello at the grocery store. They hide in plain sight, waiting for a chance. Sometimes we trust them with our secrets, our families, even our lives. It is easy to think of evil as something distant, something that happens to other people, in other places. But the truth is much closer. It could be the person next door. We want to believe we can spot danger, but sometimes we cannot. Monsters are real, and they are among us. The pain of these crimes does not end when the case is closed. Families never forget. Communities are changed forever. Fear lingers long after the headlines fade. People look over their shoulders. They lock their doors a little tighter. Trust is broken, sometimes for good. The scars are deep, and they do not heal easily. We tell these stories in hopes of learning, of warning, of finding some meaning. But there are questions that haunt us. How well do we really know the people around us? Could it happen again? No one knows who the next victim could be. No one knows where the next monster is hiding. The darkness is always closer than we think.